Today's a little different. Today we delve into the mind of not a firefighter, but a patrol officer. Justin Brandt searched me out one evening because he heard there was a firefighter that was doing a podcast. We talked, and he stated he'd like to have a chance to see what podcasting is all about, and if there's something he might be interested in hosting. We have a very frank discussion about Justin's career today, his police work in general, and his creation of the Hail Mary Project. Justin speaks pretty openly about the state of his mental health and the stresses police work can put a person under. Justin uses a couple of curse words throughout our talk, and I've decided to leave them in. If you are offended by rough talk in a way that the speaker is expressing himself, then we should maybe meet back here in a couple weeks. No harm, no foul, and I hope you enjoy it next time. Welcome back. It's Wednesday again. Today we're met with Waterloo Police Officer Justin Brandt. Justin, how you doing?
I'm doing wonderful.
Good. Tell me a little bit about the mindset of why you got to be a police officer.
I don't know. I think there was this fascination, probably from the time I was about between 8 and 10-ish. In fact, it was my first act of delinquency that put me in contact with the cops, and I think I threw a rock at the window of one of the neighbor kids. We were beefing. I don't know what the term for that back in the 90s was, but
right.
Yeah. So I threw a rock at their window, and a little bit later, then I scurry back to my house, which was they could see from that window, to my back door.
Sure.
And the officer showed up and gave me a little scolding, and that. I don't know, that just apparently left an imprint on me. Mm-hmm. And so then we had some pretty awesome SROs through middle school and high school who I had some pretty good relationships with and was able to work with once I got hired here too. So I don't know, it was just that initially wanting to be able to help the helpless was kind of the big thing, I think.
Where'd you grow up?
Here.
You were a Waterloo kid?
Yep.
East to west, Columbus?
West class of 02.
Man, you're kind of a punk kid yet. I keep
Yeah.
forgetting that.
20-year reunions this weekend, Saturday too.
Yeah, I'm at 30, so.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm a farm kid from way up north. So, How big was your class?
I think like day one was 700 something, and by the time we graduated, it dwindled down to I think 3-ish.
300. Mm-hmm. What I've seen a lot of the time in the fire side of it is the town kids. They all kind of knew each other a little bit, right? Like, so there's some classmates. Oh, I've known him since we were in East High together in 9th grade. Any of your classmates, Waterloo Police Department?
No.
No?
None. In fact, the people who did go to the same school graduated a few years either before or after had no idea that they existed.
Really?
Yeah. So, I don't know.
So you finished high school, didn't leave. You finished,
Well, barely.
It all counts. The kid with all D's still graduates. Yeah. What'd you do after school?
Nothing. I was a lazy pile of shit.
Yeah.
For the better part of probably a year and a half. Mm-hmm. And I'll back up a little bit. My dad and I didn't get along. He was kind of tough to live with, and I guess I was too. And so I moved in with my grandma, who lived in Cedar Falls. Continued going to West High, and I needed like all sorts of academic support, like tutoring, and generally just didn't have any interest in school whatsoever. And so barely graduated with like a 1.3 GPA, which counts.
It counts. No one looks at that part.
Yeah. And so then I was like, well, I'm going to go to the police science program at Hawkeye. And so I enrolled in that. Why they would have accepted anybody with that GPA is beyond me. But and I proved to them that they shouldn't have too. And I was skipping classes, not going. Again, had no interest. I was like, I just want to get into the job.
Right.
I don't need the school, and just hire me, put me in. And of course that wasn't going to happen. And so anyway, but then by this time the war in Iraq kicked off, and it was, so I had a year and some change in the police science program. I don't know what my GPA would have been at that point, but it was spring of '04 when I just stopped going altogether. You know, I said, F it, you know, I'm gonna go to combat. Because I caught myself sitting at home watching on CNN, the tanks rolling through Baghdad. I'm like, that looks like fun, man. Like, that looks like way more fun than going to Hawkeye Community College. And so went down, talked with a recruiter, and was like, F it, let's just do it. And so went into the Army and the infantry world and got to live out some good experiences and bad, but got out and off active duty in '07 and came back here. And that's when I tested, I think December of '07 for the police department.
So 3 years roughly in the military?
3 with basic training, it was like 3.5. We also got our deployment got extended a little while too by.
You were in the 10th Mountain
4 months,
Division?
yeah.
Is that what? So what would be your normal day?
In garrison back here,
No, when you were
when
over.
we're deployed. So we, oddly enough, worked like we did up until December this last year. We worked the 6-3 rotation, and that's what we did over there. So we had a small platoon, an anti-tank platoon is what we were considered. 15 of us would load into 4 trucks. So we'd have 4 gunners, then we'd have, the people. I don't know. On average, we'd have about 4 people per truck. And we just basically go out, sit on observation posts, and then we're essentially used as bait a lot of times. Go out and draw the Taliban out when we go through wadis and stuff, and just get lit up. Exchange of fire, but I think that was the goal, is just draw them out so we could kill as many of them as possible, or what we couldn't actually get to on the ground. Have the CAS get, from up above with the Apaches or the A-10s. So, yeah, it's a wild time.
Right. So you did a tour plus a little, came back here, and then tested with Waterloo PD?
Yeah.
Did you test anywhere else? Just here? What's the testing process like here?
What it is now, assuming it's the same, I don't know, because I've never had the opportunity to go to one of the agility testing deals or anything, but back then it was pretty simple stuff. Not to shame anybody who can't pass it, but I mean, it's a 1.5 mile run. It was like 20 something sit-ups or roughly 30 push-ups to roughly 30 sit-ups in a minute's time. And so it's basically you graduate from the physical testing to the written testing. And then so you're losing bodies, with each step along the way. And so from the physical, then you go to the written. And the written, I don't agree with some of the stuff that's in there. It doesn't make any sense to me why, I don't know, math stuff is in there for civil service testing. I've never used it.
Right. I remember taking my civil service test for the fire department, and there was square root problems to do. I don't think I've done a square root problem in nearly 20 years I've been on the department so far.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Like,
Yeah.
You'd expect lots of square rooting to be going on.
Yeah,
if it's
exactly.
in there.
So many problems get solved on the streets if I just know the square root of 64.
We just step back and yeah, but physically it's not very arduous, but it's lengthy. It just takes forever. And so December I tested, and it wasn't until April '09 when I actually got hired.
So you never went back to finish your police science degree at Hawkeye?
Right, correct.
You got hired despite that, which you don't have to have a degree.
Right.
Once you're hired, because you don't have a degree, you don't have any endorsements, what do you have to do to be able to get onto the streets? They're not just going to give you a gun and a badge and say, figure it out on your own.
No, but some departments do.
Yeah,
They do, and it's
insane.
wild. Like I didn't know that until I went to the academy, and I was like, "You got hired like 2 weeks ago, and you've been on the street? Like, what the hell? It doesn't even make sense." But, yeah. So they do the background, and then once you get sworn, obviously, but then you go through like a skills week initially. That's right. I went through skills, went to the academy, which was 13 weeks, I think. got certified with firearms and defensive tactics. All the stuff that we were on our whatever they call them, carriers, plate carriers, vests, whatever. Yeah, so I got certified on all the weaponry or defensive items that we carry, and then came back and jumped into the field training program, which is another 12 or 13 weeks.
How many police officers does Waterloo have right now?
God dang, I don't know. I have no idea. I mean,
You're typically always a little higher than fire, and fire has 100 and can be up to 105 sworn right now. So you always were around 120-ish, I thought.
Historically, until 2021. And then I think there were 2020, 21 is when there's just this exodus.
Right.
And I think everybody's got their theories as to why that is, but I don't want to say the job sucks, but it's difficult, and there's just so many things to have to manage with your emotions, and then you got to abide by all these confining policies, and then the legalities outside of that too, and then what we're seeing, this wave of, I guess, wokeness is really the best way to put it, where people have opinions on things that they don't understand, but they think they understand them.
Right.
And so I think a lot of people had opportunities, and they saw the writing on the wall. They saw examples were made out of a few people nationally. I said, I'm not gonna be that guy, and never see my kids again or my wife or whatever. And I think they made the right choice for them.
Well, that's certainly the thing is you have to go home. You're supposed to go home after every shift, and in theory, you want to be the same person that you were when you left.
Right.
That's not always possible right away. How do you deal with issues of PTSD? I mean, you had obvious combat experience overseas. I've been on calls with you where it seems fairly sketchy. What mindset do you have to have going in? What mindset do you have to have going out to be okay?
I think somebody asked me this a couple years ago, and I said, I think I was blessed with, how like traumatic events, sometimes our bodies will suppress certain things like memories and things like that as a defense mechanism or something. And I think so what works for me, I forget. Like I instantly almost forget about everything. Like dying children, which is a tough one. I told myself the last time we're on Westmoreland, and I think it ended up being a homicide case with a 4-year-old kid, I think. And after that, when I said the next dead kid I see, I'm probably gonna resign. And I haven't seen one since, but I think that'll probably be what it's gonna take to really get me to bite the bullet, I guess. Right. But yeah, I guess I'm lucky in that I forget a lot of the stuff from work-related stuff, and I stay so damn busy. I'm also in school full-time at UNI. We bought a house 6 years ago that has been a complete, remodel project for 6 years straight, with absolutely no breaks in between. And God, we have 3 kids, and then November of last year, like as the semester's winding down, my wife got diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. And so things were like super, super busy, and, no time to do anything. I didn't have 5 minutes a day to do a damn thing. Had to stop going to class, and thankfully I had some awesome instructors. But I communicated with them early on, like day 2 after the diagnosis, like, hey, here's what's going on. If we can work something out, great. I owe you a lifetime. If not, it is what it is, and I'll deal with it on the back end. But they were all super cool.
What are you going for your degree?
I started out as social work, and it was all, which is another story. But in December I switched that to business management with an emphasis in organizational leadership.
Right.
So it just the social work was very limiting as far as career opportunities go, and at that time I wanted to. The plan was to get my master's and then have my own clinic and do therapy for basically the population. The targeted population was going to be a lot of the kids that we end up dealing with, who are, I don't know, I'm trying to be as politically correct as possible. Somebody was, they'd say at risk, lost, troubled,
Right.
misunderstood, I think is accurate. But these kids that don't have anything, they have horrible home lives, and statistically the writing's on the wall like very early on, and so the idea was have this sports-based youth development nonprofit program. We'd identify the kids in school with the help of teachers and police and any community members, get the kids enrolled in that, and then we'd hook them up with UniQ for tutoring and field trips, and we'd feed them, and the UNI football team was coming over doing the training regimen with them. And yeah, and then at that point it was, okay, this is what I want to do, social work, that's my calling. They started calling me the social work cop at work, which was kind of funny. But then, like, November, December, like, it was October, November in the social work program where I was like, I'm going to lose my license. I'm going to lose my licensure because everything that they're telling us not to do. But I'm like, okay, this isn't going to be good for me down the road. And I'm very straightforward. Let's call a spade a spade. You don't have to like it, but and it's always worked for me. Problem is, if somebody complains, and you're in that realm, I mean, they can suspend your license or pull it, and then you can't work, and then you can't have income. And then there's some other things that it's like this isn't for me after all. And I was minoring in business anyway because I was like, well, I'm going to run my own thing. I need to kind of understand how to run that.
Yeah, and by run your own thing, we're talking about the Hail Mary Project. The fact that you were the founder to it amazes me. I remember when we first came and talked a little bit about coming on the podcast, and you talked about it, and I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
And to be able to go and look on this completely professional looking website with all the different things you do, it's phenomenally good. You answered one of the questions a little bit. So you identify the kids through school.
Yeah.
What is there not to profile the kids, but what are we normally looking at? Are we looking at middle school kids? Are we looking at elementary school kids?
Yeah. So the age of onset for first arrest, any juvenile. So in our database, there's a highlighted. How it comes up, their name comes up in red if they're juveniles. And so I'm looking every day. I'd go and scroll through, look for the juveniles who got arrested. All right. Then I was making a spreadsheet, and here's how I'm going to get in contact with mom. Typically, that's who they live with, mom. And so I'd call them, in between calls. At that time, I was on second shift for the most part, and say, hey, look, here's what's going on. And I was like neck deep in studying about trauma and the effects of that through childhood development and stuff like that. And so I felt like I had my bachelor's in trauma research or something prior to even enrolling at UNI. But it was fascinating. So I'm just making contact. Then I'd just pop up. I'd show up and say, hey, look, here's why I'm here. Contrary to what you might think, your kid got arrested for weed, and maybe you don't think that's a big deal, and maybe you think that the cops are out to just put cases on people, but that's not the case. And I actually do care about your child, and he's 12 and he's been arrested twice. That's not normal, and we need to talk about that. And so they'd be like, okay. So I just sell the program. Here's what we do. Here's the goal, and it's just one of those things where it is what it is, and it sounds bad. But the problem, is with the goal being gang diversion to prevent, or just gang prevention, you've got young black males who are 10, 12, 13, 14 getting in trouble, and these are the ones that are going to be going into these gangs for the most part. And there's no debating it. It's just a fact that we deal with here. And so the goal was to use them as the target demographic, and try to do everything we could to prevent that by giving them mentorship. Like our website was built by a team at UNI, students for free.
Oh, right on.
So,
how many members do you have in it right now? How many kids?
I have no idea, because I stepped away in end of 2019 when I was like, okay, which is another story. As I was about to get fired in 2019, I was like, I need to have a backup plan.
Fired from PD?
Yeah. And it was kind of an interesting, I was a prick. I was just a prick for a few years. I was this disgruntled employee. Had kind of had a piss poor attitude. I'm the victim. They're picking on me type of stuff, with some of the command staff. In reality, I was just doing dumb stuff and getting caught. I gave them ammunition, and eventually things built up, and Dan Trelka, best thing that ever happened to me. He asked me, he goes, I'm gonna have to ask you to resign. I said, I'm not gonna do that. You're gonna have to try your hand at firing me. And so that's what they were gonna move forward. And anyway, they pulled back and ended up getting like 4 weeks unpaid off in 2019, I think. But anyway, that's when I decided, like, I'm qualified to drive a forklift. Nothing against forklift drivers. I've done it, but I've worked harder and made less money, in the past. And I was just like, okay, time to clean up my act, fly under the radar, go into stealth mode, and hit it hard in school, because at least if I can knock out, finish the remaining credits I had to get that associate's degree, it's something,
Right.
So, but yeah, I can't remember what your question was, but kind of led us to where we're at now.
Well, I can certainly remember being at the rank of battalion chief now. I don't get to go out at all the calls like I used to when I was on 31.
Yeah.
And I'd always tell guys, one of the best fringe benefits of being on an ambulance in Waterloo is you get to meet all the cops.
Yeah.
And it's a really quick learning curve of, it's 3:00 in the morning. We're at a gang fight at Gates Park, and I don't want to badmouth any place, but this is the one that's coming to mind. Yeah. And I would look to see which police officers were there, and all the police officers are good. They all control situations well, but some do it better.
Well, yeah. Well, I wouldn't even get. Some don't.
Some don't.
Very well at all, actually. Yeah. But anyway.
Well, maybe I've forgotten those bad ones. But I would always know that if you were there, I was always okay. And I always look towards you or other guys that I could trust to, they're starting to get a little jumpy. Yeah. We need to get going faster. Whereas if it's just, hey, we're all just talking at this point, everything's still okay. Yeah. So I think that relationship with, at least for me anyway, as a paramedic, with the PD was always a good one. Yeah. So I'm not surprised to know that a guy like you that's always active, always doing things, is starting things like this Hail Mary, that founded this Hail Mary project. The reason you initially got a hold of me is that you were interested in possibly starting a podcast as well.
Yeah.
How are those feelings?
Stronger than ever.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
I haven't scared you away yet.
No. In fact, I was just in my cart right now. I've got about $700 worth of stuff.
Oh, right on.
Just got to find a way to purchase it without my wife finding out.
Yeah, make it fishing gear or something.
It'll be the next obstacle. But yeah, like I'm hot to try to do it.
Yeah. What do you want yours about? You got a name yet?
No, I've got a list. I've got like a 2 or 3 page document in Google Docs that has the content, potential guests, names, topics. So the things we have worked out is where we're going to do it. Got a friend who works over at the sheriff's office who's a bachelor, and he's got an incredible setup, in his basement. So he's got the bar, just the lighting is perfect too. I mean, and he's a tech guru, so he said he'll do the editing and all that crap.
Awesome.
All I'm gonna have to do is supply the guests, probably some tequila, and the equipment. But yeah, so as far as content though, nothing specific. So we don't. Ideally, I would almost like to have a co-host. I think that'd be cool. Have a 3-person deal, 1 guest, 2 guests, but surely two co-hosts. At least now, this is what I'm thinking.
Right.
And one of the things I wanted to do back during the Hail Mary days when I was active, so I got off that topic. I left that in 2019 to go back to school full time. I wasn't going to be able to manage everything. maybe you can cut and splice that
We'll
back into the right place. So in Hail Mary, we were going to, I wanted to do this series called the Conviction series, which was kind of a knockoff of Joe Buck's, that show that he had where he'd interview.
Undeniable?
Yes. And I was like, dude, that would be freaking rad. Have a setup like that with just people who got awesome life stories. One guy, Patrick, Pastor Q, his stepdad, has since passed, but
Okay.
anyway, he did like 17 years in prison for robbery. And I chance encounter, I pulled him over one night for something, and I said, "Hey, I'm all done with the stop here, but I got a question for you." And we just started BSing about his life and crap, and Patrick Marshall, that was his name. And anyway, we exchanged numbers. I go, "I would love to sit down and talk with you just about life sometime, man." I think at some point we got together, but it wasn't for very long. But having somebody like that who, let's get down to the root. What happened in your life that led you to that point? How did that shape you? I mean, there's plenty of people around here who could talk about, their days growing up in the hood, doing the shootings, some of that stuff. I just find it fascinating to figure out that frame of mind that they're in at that time, what their life was like that led up to it, and what that might have been like. Because there's one guy, it took some work to get a hold of him, but when I heard he was back in town, a mutual friend of ours said, "Yeah, he's been out for like 2 years." I go, "No way." I go, "I will buy him dinner if he's willing to go with, anywhere he wants to sit down and have dinner with me." And I would just want to talk to him. And it took probably 4 or 5, 6 weeks, like, for him to clear things up to make that happen. But he came, and at one time we were mortal enemies,
Right.
and, we finally officially meet each other, embrace each other, and like that brotherly like hug. "Hey man, how you doing?" Sat down and chopped it up for like 4 hours at Applebee's. And I was like, why did it take so long? It's almost like approving things through the government. So many channels had to approve things, so it took so damn long. But he goes, you got to understand something. I had to talk with my people on the street and say, "Hey, listen, what do you guys think about this? This dude, he's a cop, whatever. He wants to talk to me about whatever." He goes, if me and you were sitting here and one of these guys from the street walked in and knew who I was, meaning him, he goes, they would be able to pick you out. They just know who you are and where you work for. And he goes, then I'd have to deal with that on the back end. And he goes, it wouldn't be good. So he goes, I had to at least do due diligence and run it by people and say, "Hey, look, here's what I'm going to do, just so you know," and cleared the air. And so, but anyway, what I got from that conversation was that me and him had a lot of similarities, and he was extremely intelligent. And so it's easy to, well, I've been guilty of it, think these guys in the street are idiots, in my early days, and
Right.
they're not. And
No, absolutely. They just weren't pointed the right direction. You have leaders of industry on the streets right now, but they just didn't have that
Absolutely.
opportunity.
Yeah, it was bizarre, and that was still, this has been 2-3 years. I guess that was pre-COVID, but that's still like one of the most profound experiences of my life, like getting that opportunity. And I go, what do you want to do to crawl out of this hole? Because he was working at, I think, Burger King and somewhere else. Dude, what were we, 34 years old ish, working at Burger King because that's the best he can get. He no pun intended, but he wasn't having it his way. If that's what he wanted in life, I'm sure he didn't want to be right there at that point in his life. But all that stuff in life leading up to it kind of backed him into a corner. But he's working 2 jobs, had kids that were in middle school, and was doing some, in my eyes, admirable things at that point. And so it's like, well, what do you want to do? And he said he wanted to write. So we tried getting him hooked in with UNIQ to try to, find that next step, whatever that would have been. And now we haven't talked in a couple of years, but we stayed in touch for a little while. But yeah, so now I wonder, what the hell's he up to?
Right.
So
What's next for you then? What else do you want to? So you're 39,
38. Yeah.
38.
Yeah.
You've got 16 years before you can retire from PD.
Yeah.
What else do you want to do?
Do the podcast. Finish school at UNI. Get my MBA.
You're a patrolman, right?
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
Any desires to move up the ranks that way?
No, not at all. It's my love for the job's gone. And I'm comfortable saying that. So, I go to work, I do my job.
Mm-hmm.
There's days I don't like it. I'd like to have an easier night here and there. And as far as like call volume goes, but, no, I mean, the fire's gone, and I think I burned it out the first few years. I just worked way too much, worked too hard, got in a lot of trouble, made a lot of mistakes, a lot of airheaded mistakes, which caused relationship issues with supervisors. And I had an ego problem, which didn't help things at all. So, I mean, that's why I go back. Dan nearly fired me. Was the most humbling. It was the best thing that ever happened to me, like professionally. 'Cause, I mean, it was like a slap to the face with like a steel-toed shoe, though, and
Right.
it was like, okay, I need to chill out. Some of these other things that I was perceiving, I'm the problem. I got the mouth. I need to let them know what I thought of them at that time. And, but yeah, so anyway, what's next, I guess, is I'd really like to be in a position where I can help coach, develop people, work with people, maybe do some traveling, but ultimately I want to work in the private sector, and we do have a lot of job security here. I mean, it'd almost be foolish to want to leave when there's the health insurance and just this incredible benefits package that the city gives us. But at some point, that cumulative stress over the course of however long you spend. Not that other divisions are not stressful, but I will go out and say when you're on patrol, it is the front lines.
Yeah, it is.
Of the battlefield, and every single night you are at risk of something. If it's going to a hot call or whatever, you get those constant adrenaline spikes are not good for you in the long run.
Right.
And so for somebody like me, you could expect a 30-year career on patrol and probably to live about 18 months after retirement before I croak, So it's like, that ain't no good. I'd rather.
Right. That's not the best ratio that you want.
No, it's like, what the hell's the point of all that?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Just see what's next. I mean, it's hard to plan because, we put this plan together at home. We're not assuming that Kesley was going to get breast cancer, and there's going to be complications with that. And, then multiple deaths in our family in the span of 4 weeks. And it's like, God dang, so who knows what could happen? I mean, we're going to have to audible at some point, I'm sure, but in a perfect world, finish our house and find some time to just have some peace and quiet, relax.
And learning how to have peace and quiet is one of the things that
Yeah.
I think people in your profession, people in my profession find of, yeah, we can have those hobbies and go out and do things, but are we doing those things because, well, if I want to go fishing, now I have to get all my fishing stuff together. I got to get the boat together.
Yeah.
I got to fuel up the truck. I got to load it up. Is it just having that list of things to do, the thing that's keeping us going? It's not necessarily, oh, I'm fishing now. It's having that time of, I can shut down.
Yeah.
And I can just sit outside and look at the trees, whatever it is you want to do. But it's that idea of being able to slow down that I think we all need to worry about. Eventually we have to. Our bodies won't let us keep going.
Yeah, that's something that I am yet to even begin to wrap my mind around. I mean, a friend of mine who's a Desert Storm veteran, he's always told me, he goes, you're too busy. He goes, and I know why you're busy. You're purposely busy so you don't have to dwell on things from Afghanistan. And I go, well, I don't think that's, well, shit, maybe you're onto something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's like, I never thought of that. So subconsciously, maybe that's what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the things with the fire department, it seems like everybody has a second job.
So many of them do. Yep. And I
find that interesting.
I think part of it is what we just talked about, but part of it too is just the ability of 1 day on, 2 days off. You have that time.
Yeah.
That you can want to do a little bit more.
Yeah, Elliot, see him? He's got his lawn mowing.
Elliot Mueller.
Yeah, yeah, the lawn mowing thing.
Mm-hmm. I think he's laying off on that now. I think his wife is expecting, and
oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know, I don't know, and I don't know a lot of the fire guys. It seems like maybe there's been some maybe retirements or something, but I feel like there's a lot more new faces now.
See, I feel that way with the cops every time I go on a call, especially.
Well, you're right.
I'm like, who? This is a junior high class. What's going on? You know?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of new faces though, for sure. And in fact, last night one of the guys was saying, he goes, I don't think there's any, because we're talking about like extra putting in for extra duty things, you know, and you got to have 2 years on. God, I don't think there's anybody with 2 years on in here anymore. It's like they're going to have to change that at some point.
Right.
But I was thinking, so I was watching the podcast with AJ Elliott.
Uh-huh.
And talking about the tech rescue stuff and how they've made exceptions in the past if somebody's like, if it just makes sense, you know, okay, you don't got the time on, and they generally don't do that at the police department. I don't know why, because let's say you get a I don't know, a team guy or somebody with military experience who would come in and they're brand new to the PD. And there's openings on the TAC team.
Mm-hmm.
I would think that let's change the policy, or
Right.
let's put in the policy that in certain circumstances the 2 year limit can be waived if it just makes more sense than not, you know. And that would be one of those deals.
Right. If a policy is stopping the best person from being in the best position, it's a bad policy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way to put that, I think. But yeah, I don't know. I've as far as the fire department goes, I've always been kind of fascinated with like the 24 hours on. Mm-hmm. Like, and I've never yet met a guy who said they did not like it.
No, yeah, I don't know if you will or not. It is. It's just awesome.
I can't wrap my mind around how that would be.
I think some spouses would maybe question whether how awesome it was when they come home and they're just absolute zombies. And then you sleep for 8 hours and get up, eat, and then go back to bed. So you're gone 2 days really instead of one. But as far as just I wouldn't want to do anything else but that.
Really, I couldn't imagine doing it. Garrett Peters was pulling my arm a couple years ago. He goes, you ought to apply for the fire department. I go, can I just do like 8 hour shifts though? I don't know if they which I was wondering, like, why don't they do 8 or 12s? And
some cities do 12s.
Do
yeah. There was an odd 10, 14 sit up at one time. Yeah, I don't know. But the industry standard is a 24-hour shift, and then how they split them up is different a couple different ways. We do 48 on, 24 off, but there's a California swing, it's called, where it's 24 on, 24 off, 24 on, 24 off, 72 off. Or 24 on, then 72 off. And then I know, like, out west, when it's wildfire season, you can basically sign up for your days a month in advance. So you could do your 10 days a month all in a row, and then have 20 days off. Just because they've got enough seniority, they can do that, and they know, well, I'm gonna be called back for this anyway. I don't want to be called back on my time off.
Really? Wow. God dang. And it's a different business.
Yep, it is. It's completely different. So
how long have you been over there now?
18 years.
18. As the battalion chief, like what influence do you have over I guess the culture, some of the things, let's say prior to you getting promoted, however things were, because I know in years past, guys I've talked to who have gotten promoted, made the rank of captain and so forth, at least lieutenant, they say, well, it's not what I thought it was. I thought I was going to have more control, over certain things. And so they do get some control, but I don't know, they end up, I think, having a rude awakening sometimes and thinking, well, I thought I was going to be able to influence this or that and other thing, and I just wasn't, and it's like beating my head against a wall now.
Yeah. I think I'm happy with the amount of influence I can put, not necessarily on the department or my shift, but more on the community.
Really?
I have more opportunities that way, whereas the culture of the department or the culture of the shift, I think I probably had more influence when I was a lieutenant on the engine.
Yeah.
As a battalion chief, I make a schedule. There's so many rules you follow. There's only so many places a person can go. As far as training goes, that's through our training department. I'm basically just organizing when it's done. But when I was on the engine and a lieutenant, I'd have a new firefighter with me, and it was more of a one-on-one. This is how to be a firefighter.
Yeah.
Right? You went through your 6-week boot camp training. Now I'm going to tell you how we really do it. Or when I was on the ambulance of a new medic that came through school, that's great. You learned a lot of skills. Now I'm going to show you how it's done in Waterloo and probably everywhere else in the world. So I do miss those aspects of it, of that personal one-on-one. I guess as you go up, it just becomes broader because you're covering more people.
What do you think of this town? I just feel like there's a uniqueness in the city. Like it's so busy. Mm-hmm. It's so busy all the time.
Right. I love this town. I grew up in a farm, and the nearest town was 6 miles away, and it was 3,000 people.
Yeah.
So there was a giant culture shock when I came here, especially once I got on the ambulance and start seeing some of the homes that people live in, some of the conditions that kids have to be in, and taking that into consideration of we're seeing the absolute worst of the city. But then in the same sense, you do get to see all the wonderful good things about it. I'm pretty happy that I'm here. When I first tested here, it sounds so silly now because it's just so simple. Test here, get on here, and a year later, Rochester, Minnesota would test, and I was going to test with them because at the time Rochester had a better image. It's certainly grown. 18 years ago, Rochester was the same size as Waterloo. Now Waterloo is around 70,000 and Rochester is at like 110,000. So they've skyrocketed in size. They've got, I don't want to say all kinds of money, but their tax base is incredible. Whereas here in Waterloo, it's blue collar, it's hard work. The tax base isn't what it should really be.
Right.
But in that same sense, I'm okay with that. I want, it sounds odd, I want that fight, if that makes sense.
I remember when I was in the academy in 2009, there is this, not that there's not anymore, but there's this pride. Like, people like from Iowa City and other parts of the state, like, you're from Waterloo. Like, man, like, like how dare ye?
Right.
Like, it's got to be dangerous. I'm like, well, yeah, it is, and I'm thinking tough guy mentality. And I mean, it lives up to its name for being a small town, but it's just, it kills me. Like, I watched that Netflix series about Flint, Michigan, the Flint PD.
Right. Yep.
I can't think what it's called now, but I was like sucked in. Mm-hmm. Like, and I never watched anything cop stuff when I'm not working. And for whatever reason, but I'm like, this reminds me of Waterloo. Mm-hmm. At least at a point where violence, running call to call nonstop, low on staff. I've never been to Flint, and I kind of want to go now, though, just to kind of see
how well he did of representing it.
Yeah, but it made me think of Waterloo. Like, this is kind of like us right now.
A few months ago, I went and assisted Cedar Rapids in their battalion chief testing, and I was the only battalion chief. I think everybody else were chiefs.
Yeah.
But there was, I guess there was a battalion chief from Cedar Rapids, there's a chief from Sioux City. There's a couple more, I think one of the Des Moines area ones, and oh, you're from Waterloo. I'm like, yeah, I don't have a shiv on me. Easy, everybody. Calm down. But it still has that reputation.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say about that. But it's...
Well, and I was a little taken back. I'm like, come on, seriously, you're from Cedar Rapids. You guys are worse than we are. Just watch the news, if you believe anything is on the news anymore.
Right. I was gonna say, like, well, how do you know? Like, and like, I guess unless you're looking and comparing, like, stats on paper for types of incidents, but I don't know. I mean, I would have argued a couple years ago that we had, on average per year, 300 shootings a year, which sounds crazy, but you'll have them daily, and now I don't know how it is now, but or you'd have multiple in one day, 2 or 3.
Right.
Then you'll go a few days with none, and then a whole weekend, Memorial Day weekend, 5 people shot. So you've got at least 5 shootings, probably closer to 7 or 8, because people didn't get shot in most shootings, and those make up for those days where there's nothing.
Right.
So yeah, it's the wild Midwest, I guess.
Right. Justin, anything we missed? Anything else you want to touch on? We're kind of running short on our time.
No, that's
well, I
it.
really appreciate you coming in.
It's my pleasure. I'm thankful that you had me.
Yeah. Good luck with everything. Let me know when you're on the podcast. I'll try to be a good guest sometime for you.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Justin Brandt.
Yeah.
I hope you got as much out of this episode as I did. Justin has had some real deal dangerous stuff in his life and is still standing. Along with all those things, he was able to look beyond the lines of conventional tactics and try to create a better world for some less privileged people. The next statement I make may sound like I'm making a stereotype based off of one conversation, so please understand that my statement comes from years of contact with police and fire that most laypersons will never know. Police officers and firefighters have completely different mindsets. Yes, we are both public servants. Yes, we both rely heavily on paramilitary structures and have a large population of veterans in our respective ranks. But we are vastly different. And I think this episode hopefully shows a glimpse of that. Clearly, this leads me to the controversy of public safety officers, like they use in Cedar Falls. If you listen to the powers that be there, the system works, money is saved, and services are better than ever. Talk to the citizens, and services have declined. Look at what the surrounding volunteer departments did. They tried breaking off their mutual aid agreements due to the worry of the additional workload overtaxing their members. Listen, I can't be a cop. Not because I'm not brave enough or strong enough. It's because I don't have the right mindset to be a police officer. And that mindset goes both ways. This is our show for this week. As you know, I don't do it alone. I'd like to thank Justin Brandt for stopping in, our producer Angie Beck for knowing how to press all the right buttons, and Caleb Martin for the show's original music. Until next time, I'm your host, Bill Beck, asking you to get out there and have your voice heard.